Today we're doing a deep dive into one of the most complex challenges out there for social enterprises.
Hmm.
How do you actually design a business model that, delivers a real social good, but is also financially scalable so it can last?
Right. And not just last, but grow.
Exactly. We're
Yep.
focusing specifically on the base of the pyramid or the BOPI market. We're talking about over 3 billion people.
And while big commercial brands have sort of figured out how to sell soap and snacks in these markets,
Our sources today really highlight how incredibly difficult it is to build viable strategies for essential social goods.
things like safe water.
Exactly. Safe water. I mean,
Right.
something like 700 million people still lack reliable access. So the mission today is to unpack the practical strategies that actually work, the ones that move a solution from a small pilot to a real large-scale system.
And to get us started, it's probably good to define our terms. A business model is essentially the blueprint for how an organization proposes, creates, and captures value.
So the value proposition, value creation, and value capture.
Precisely. And our sources today give us three really powerful complementary lessons that build on what we already know. They show how you can transition that initial model into something much, much bigger.
Which is crucial for the audience for this deep dive, practitioners, policymakers.
Absolutely. But before we jump into those new lessons, we should probably cover the foundations. The literature points to four general factors that any successful bulky business model needs.
Okay, what are they?
First, the model has to be inclusive. This means it uses rich indigenous knowledge, it uses the creativity of the population to solve local problems.
So not just imposing a solution from the outside.
Exactly. Second, it must be complex.
Ah, the complexity factor. This is that structural tension we always talk about.
It is. It's about managing that constant push and pull between profitability and the social outcome.
Because the margins are just razor thin.
They're so thin. And the customers are incredibly price sensitive. Any cost increase threatens affordability, but if you don't invest for the long term, you jeopardize the whole mission.
Okay, so inclusive, complex. What's number 3?
Number three is collaborative. You have to leverage your capabilities with other actors in the ecosystem. NGOs, suppliers, the local
I have
government.
to do it alone.
You can't. And finally, the model has to be scalable. This is where we hear about the four A's.
Affordability, accessibility, awareness, and acceptance.
Right. And to scale, you need that cumulative high demand to hit economies of scale. That's the only way you keep things affordable in the long run.
It sounds like real scale means you have to get past just cutting costs, because if you only focus on that, you might end up with a product nobody wants or one that just isn't sustainable.
Exactly.
So how do you move beyond that? I think that brings us directly to lesson 1.
It does. Fostering value in context.
And this lesson is all about the value proposition. It's about moving from just value in exchange, selling a product at a good price, to something deeper.
Value in social context. It means going way beyond just reducing the poverty penalty.
Which is that awful situation where bubby consumers end up paying more for basic goods.
A lot more. And the Manila Water case study is just a perfect illustration of this shift.
How so?
Well, initially they saw that BOPI consumers were paying about 7 times more for water from informal vendors. A brutal penalty.
So their first idea was just to compete on price.
It was. Their initial model was just selling water from trucks for 9 cents per 20 liters versus the 36 cents the vendors were charging.
A huge saving. But that wasn't the big breakthrough.
No. The modification that actually led to scale was their Tubig para sa Barangay program. They switched from trucks to community water taps.
So they realized the problem wasn't just the price.
Exactly. The real customer pain was the whole experience. The queuing for hours, the waiting for a truck that might not show up, having your whole day revolve around water, and then physically hauling these heavy canisters home.
It's a huge non-monetary cost.
Huge. By installing community taps with 24-hour access, they solved that pain. That understanding of value and context is what led to scale. They ended up providing safe water to 1.7 million people.
And it's fascinating because product design can do the same thing. Look at Hydrologic in Cambodia.
Right.
Their first filter, the Tunsai, was $18. It worked, but consumers called it a brownish ceramic clay pot. It looked cheap.
So people didn't want to pay full price.
No. And Hydrologic became dependent on NGO subsidies, which, is a death sentence for a sustainable business model.
So what do?
They pivoted. They designed the Super Tensai filter for $22. Functionally, it was pretty much the same, but the design was aspirational.
What did it look like?
It was shiny, light blue, and had this big rabbit mascot, a symbol of wisdom in Cambodian culture. People were proud to own it, to display it in their homes.
Wow.
This wise, cunning, and beautiful product, as they called it, created so much value in context that demand exploded. They achieved economies of scale, their costs dropped to $16, and they sold 300,000 of them in 5 years.
That is such a crucial reminder. Dignity, desire, these aren't luxuries. They are fundamental to the value proposition. The solution has to fit the user's life and their aspirations, not just their budget.
So getting that value in context right is a huge first step, but it's really only half the battle, because the sources show that once your model is working, you can't just freeze it. It has to keep evolving as you scale. And that brings us to lesson 2, allowing for modifications.
Yes, and Sarvahal's franchising model in India is the textbook example of this. Their initial model, let's call it T1, targeted small villages, maybe 1,000 people.
Okay.
The investment for a local franchisee was pretty low, about $950, to run a simple water kiosk. And the revenue share was 40% to Sarvahal, 50% to the franchisee.
Seems reasonable, but that's not what they scaled with.
Not at all. When they moved to their scaling model, they were targeting larger, more complex villages of 3,000 people. This required much more complex distribution trucks, water ATMs, bigger kiosks.
So the investment must have gone way up.
Way up. The franchise investment jumped to $14,000.
Wait, a 15-fold increase.
Yeah.
That's a huge risk. How could a local entrepreneur possibly absorb that kind of jump? It feels like it would undermine the whole inclusive model.
It was a monumental shift. And to manage it, they had to radically restructure the value capture part of the model.
The revenue split.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To make that $14,000 investment even possible, they flipped the revenue split. The franchisee share went up to 80%, with only 20% going back to Sarvahal.
So the whole financial structure had to co-evolve with the scaling plan.
It had to. And that forced changes to the value proposition, too. They had to add things like smaller bottles, ATM access, home delivery fees, just to make the numbers work.
And you see this with PureFresh, too. They started with these expensive water shops, but the loan repayments were so long, it was slowing down their scaling.
Right.
So they shifted to cheaper water vending machines inside other local shops. It created a much denser network and shifted the customer value to just pure convenience.
And this is where so many organizations get stuck. These modifications are constant and necessary, but they're incredibly hard to manage if you don't have the internal data to know which changes are actually helping.
Which I think leads us perfectly to the final insight from the sources, lesson 3.
Embracing ambidexterity.
Right. This idea that to get to true massive scale, you have to do 2 things at once. You have to exploit your existing successful BOP market,
while simultaneously exploring new adjacent business opportunities.
And this isn't some luxury. The sources say it's a structural requirement for long-term financial health.
That exploration is vital because, frankly, the thin margins from the core BOP market often aren't enough to cover all the R&D and complexity you need for real scale.
So what do these exploration strategies look like?
Well, one is product or segment extension. Look at Hindustan Unilever. They started with a basic $22 filter for the BOP market. But then they expanded their portfolio to a dozen different filters, some priced up to $600. These were aimed at middle-income families, offices, shops.
And that revenue from the higher-end market supports the whole operation?
Exactly. It supports the brand, covers R&D, and it creates this virtuous social cycle where BOP consumers can buy into that same aspirational brand.
Another great strategy is the service nexus.
Yes, like Elite Enterprise in Nepal. They turned their water kiosks into combined energy nexus centers.
So they weren't just selling water.
Not at all. They sold water, sure, but they also added electricity services, phone charging, solar lamp rentals. This dramatically increased the revenue from each location and made the whole model more robust.
And we saw diversification earlier with hydrologic.
We did. They secured a totally separate income stream by selling voluntary carbon credits.
Because their filters meant families didn't have to burn firewood to boil water.
Right. And those avoided CO2 emissions could be sold on the carbon market. A stable, totally external revenue stream.
But this kind of exploration, it requires a specific organizational structure, right? It's not just about having good ideas.
You're absolutely right. You can't just ask the team that's optimizing your thin margin water delivery to also invent a carbon credit monetization system.
They're completely different skill sets.
Totally. The sources point to examples like Grumming Veolia, which set up a whole separate team to explore selling 20-liter jars to non-BIP customers. Or Hydrologic, which created structurally independent units, one for exploitation, their core filter business, and one for exploration, the carbon credits.
So if we synthesize all three lessons.
True scale at the BP seems to come from integrating these three things. First, valuing context, that deep local understanding. Second, modifiable scaling, the flexibility to adapt as you grow. And third, organizational ambidexterity, the structure to exploit and explore at the same time.
It's so clear that this isn't just about a better product. It's about a total organizational transformation, a willingness to completely change your revenue model, your product, your internal teams, just to succeed.
Absolutely. The organizations that succeed are the ones that refuse to let their initial success freeze their potential. They have to rethink and reshape everything.
So for you, the listener, the manager, the social entrepreneur, maybe the key question isn't just whether your current product works.
I think the question is your organization structurally designed for permanent adaptation? Are your systems built for stability? Or are they built to systematize learning about what your customers really need before the pressure to scale forces your hand? Because that foresight, that's what separates a promising pilot from a solution that truly lasts.